Hello, everyone. My name is Neha, and welcome to Dropping Your Armor, where we listen to stories from thinkers, doers, and dreamers, all in the hope of unlocking our infinite human potential. In this episode, you'll hear the story of Jochen Goeser. Jochen started out as a student of economics who was incredibly curious about people. He worked in consulting for many years, where he used this curiosity to develop powerful change management solutions for his clients. Today, he brings all that knowledge and passion to his role as the global project lead for Agile Transformations at Bosch Power Tools. In this conversation, we talk in depth about transformations, specifically about how to orchestrate holistic, human-centric, and people-led change that radically transforms the DNA of organizations. Much like life, transformations are a journey. It's about creating a movement from within that fuels a shift in mindset, culture, and behavior, as well as structures and processes, while embracing the uncertainty and messiness that come with it. It takes quite a lot to begin a transformation journey and much more to sustain it. In this conversation, Jochen shares his stories and learnings of how to do just that. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Jochen. Welcome to Dropping Your Armor. I'm really happy that you could join us.
Hi, Nia. Very much welcome. Yeah, very good to be on this podcast. Thanks with you for the invite.
And I have so much to ask you, Jochen. The first conversation with you was also very interesting, so I have a lot of questions. But before we dive into those, let's take a moment to maybe introduce yourself to all the listeners.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, my name is Jochen, Jochen Goeser. I'm working for Robot Bosch Power Tools. I'm leading the project Agile Transformation there. I'm living close to Stuttgart, like many Bosch people. In my free time, I have a family with 4 kids, 4 daughters. So there's not so much hobby next to that, but yeah, I like to go out into the nature, and I really like beach and sunshine. So that's a bit of myself.
That's nice. I was just going to ask, in your free time, how would you have free time if you have 4 daughters and you're leading a big agile transformation? That's amazing. Okay. Thank you, Jochen. And we always start with a little bit of a tune-in, something lighthearted. So maybe we can start with that question, and then we can go into the topics of transformations. So here's your tune-in question. When you were 8 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, that's a good question. 8 years old. I mean, you can calculate a bit now, probably my age. So when I was 8 years old, there was the big Boris Becker hype in Germany. You know, the tennis player, the legend, won Wimbledon and whatever. So I'm this Boris Becker kid, kind of. I started tennis because of him, and I of course had the dream to become a professional tennis player. It didn't work out. That's why we can have this conversation here as well, obviously. But I really liked it because doing sports, tennis, I really like. I still play it. Traveling around the world, competing with other people, getting to know other people. I think that was my dream at that age.
Oh, that's nice. And that's also nice that you still have it in your life, even if you're not a professional player, but you still keep at it.
Yeah.
Well, when I was 8 years old, I wanted to be an astronaut. And I was really fascinated by outer space and, what's out there. And there's so much you don't know. And I think I had almost made up my mind that's what I was going to pursue until I was, I don't know, in my early teens, and I stumbled into a psych class for the first time. And I don't know, I think I got more fascinated by the earthlings on our planet than outer space. So I changed course and started studying psychology. But maybe in another life, I would also really love to pursue, maybe in a multiverse, right? In another universe, I am an astronaut. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah.
All right, good. So, Jochen, I think you've had a lot of interesting experiences at Bosch, of course, but even before that. And I wanted to dig into this topic of transformations with you. But before we go in there, I wanted to ask you how you even came to this point where you are working with transformations, that you have this role in Bosch, and where you develop this passion for transforming organizations. How did you arrive at this point in your life?
Yeah, I think it goes back a little bit. I mean, for me, I was never the guy who studied something, who want to be like studying medicine, become doctor, who was very clear. And I'm feeling still I'm on the search of what I want to become in the next years, in the next stage of my life. On the other hand side, if you're looking backwards, I think there are some connecting dots. So I studied economics, and I was always a bit different than some of the other people. They were focused on mathematics and understanding the technical aspects of many of them went into banking or insurance. But I got really interested in what you would call nowadays probably it's behavioral economics. So how do people behave in systems? How do they get incentivized, or do they need to incentivize? And I think there my deep passion for addressing people issues or people things in transformations in business context kind of started. And then when I started my professional career in consulting, I worked for Accenture for 12 years. There, of course, technical was still the predominant factor for doing transformation, but I got soon very interested in the people aspects of these transformations. So be it training, enablement, or answering the question, okay, what does this change in IT mean for me, for my team, for my leader? Do I have a new team, a new leader? So all these aspects of the people connection to what we call transformation. And I think that carried me over to take the job also at Bosch, because there we have started over the last couple of years what we call an Agile Transformation. And there they really looked for some outside perspective with some background in Agile, but also with transformational background. And I think that was just a win-win for both sides.
Hmm. Very interesting. And how did your beliefs and the assumptions that you held about people and organizations change throughout the course of this journey? And how do you see also transformations now at this point in time in your life?
I think when I'm looking back at how we did transformations in consulting or also in traditional projects or in traditional setups, I think there's used to be the very strong belief that everything is plannable, right? You need to bring a motivated group of people together. You need to convince the others to join you or push them or whatever the words were used there. You set out an ambitious plan, secure your budget and capacity, and really set up milestones, and then you will happily land in paradise after a couple of months or years, depending on the scope. And I think over the last years, I have realized, which was never how I really liked it, but I think over the last years, I really see more and more projects or transformation journeys really setting out a different agenda, not really having this goal in mind or specifying the real goal to the very detailed and plan it out in detail, but really get people, organizations motivated to basically become proactive in shaping their future, and knowing that the future is uncertain to a certain extent, then also have the humbleness to know that not everything will be planned and we might not end where we wanted or thought we will end up. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so there seems to be a lot of also vulnerability in that, right? That we don't have all the answers, and it's still sort of you have your headlights on, you're driving through the fog, hoping that where you're going, you'll reach your destination, but you can only really see 3 feet in front of you. It seems like there is greater
Yeah, and
recognition that that's what a transformation actually really looks like.
yeah, and I think that's for me also, if I jump in here, that's for me actually also the connection to real life or personal life, right? Because I think we have very high expectations in the business context to have everything planned out and knowing exactly what are the next 5 steps after we have done the next 10 steps, kind of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in private life, um, we are much more adaptive to whatever situation comes up. You know, you don't. Nobody of us plans his personal private life in detail for the next 10 years. You're always up for some surprises, some good or some challenging ones. You meet a person that you want to stay forever in your life. You have a child. You have an accident. You lose somebody that you love. I mean, there are all these things that you cannot plan. And I think the humans are very, very good in being, how should I say, very adaptive to their environment. And I think that's the biggest opportunity for for humans being on this earth. And I think we should not lose this potential also in the business context. And I think there's huge potential still left there.
Yeah. Oh, really? I mean, that's absolutely true. Like we have uh, uh, we could have had a tennis star and an astronaut sitting here if the plans would have worked out, right? When we
Yes,
were 8 years
exactly.
old, but that's really not the case.
Yeah,
Um, and it sometimes it turns out for better, sometimes for worse, but you can't really control the outcomes, right? That's what you're saying, is
mm,
that the important thing is that you keep moving, you take that step, you keep on
yeah.
going along the journey. So, Jochen, you talked about transformations being somewhat similar to a human journey, a human life journey, right? You made that parallel that in life, we don't really question or plan the next 15 steps, and we go with the flow in a way, and sometimes things might surprise us, sometimes they might actually go along with the plan, but you don't have much control. All you can do is really go through the process. Just to play devil's advocate over here, right? There's another side of the equation. When it's your life and you're the person, you're the protagonist in that story, I guess it's somehow easier to live with that uncertainty because it's you. But somehow, when you look at the organizational context and you're trying to take along 100 people with you, or in the case of Bosch, right, 400,000 people with you, that is a significant amount of effort. Where does that parallel of transformation as a life journey stop working, and where do we need to adopt different beliefs to actually have entire organizations move towards the same goal?
It's a very good question, Nia. And I might not be 100% sure or if there's a right or wrong answer with that. Let me try to explain it in my words. I think if you want people to follow you on a journey that you think goes in the right direction, you need to take them by the hands. And by the hands, I don't mean to pull them and hold them tight, right? But to offer a journey that has high potential to change certain aspects of life in an organization that are currently not 100% perfect to something better. And I say it's so general because that might be very different for very different groups of people, or at the end, very different for individuals, right? So what I want to say is it's a high effort on communicating and talking to people individually, in groups, in teams, in divisions, whatever you want to call it. You need to really take people. Always a certain amount of people who say, let's change something. They always already stand behind you, you know?
Yeah.
That's a very small number of people usually. And then the group gets usually bigger if you set out something what you think is not working today and where we might find some better solutions. Then the group's getting bigger. Um, but I think this effort in terms of communicating not only what you think is right, but really listening to the people, what is not working at the moment, and can we develop something that might be better for you, for me, for the overall organization. That's something where I think a lot of effort is going in, and where a lot of effort should even be more going in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually, if you look at the research, right, there's I mean, if you even if you don't, if you look at organizations, when you announce something like a transformation, that we want to do something differently or we want to move in a certain direction, I've noticed that more often than not, right, it's met with a lot of fear. It's a lot of questions of how are things going to change, how is it going to impact me, and of course, all rational, right? There's a lot of fear that comes up, and if you look at the research, right, where there's fear, there's very little creativity and movement, because it somehow stops you in your path. And what you're saying, what I really like, and also what I've experienced, is that the way out of that is not to suppress that fear and to say that, you know what, no, it's all going to be all right, and try to minimize that fear, but it's actually to create hope for a better desired future, and then by doing that, move the people in the direction of that hope, and create that feeling of agency.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that, and I would also add to that, whenever people have, in addition to what we just discussed, the feeling that they can also co-create with you that hope. right? If they have a feeling, okay, there's not a written plan in stone, which I just need to follow and I need to believe in it, but rather have something where I can bring my thoughts in, myself in, to make it a bit my own hope, my own future as well, then I think there's a big chance that the right people also want to start from scratch with you.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an example or a story where you saw this happening, where you were met with certain fears, and how did you actually turn that around?
I've seen that in 2 or 3 different projects that I was leading, and I think one story that always comes to mind is also when you, I mean, the story to nominate or volunteer people to go on this journey together with you is also not new, right? What is new that, and I look at some of those faces just when I recall my memory, is when you enter the room and you have these volunteers, transition teams or transformation teams that want to engage with you. And they look at you and really expect from you that you have everything planned out. I think in many organizations, the thinking is, okay, I volunteer my time, but please tell me what I need to do because I don't know it. And if you enter the room then, and I had it in 2 or 3 different projects, to actually say, I don't know it as well in detail, so we need to figure it out together, then there's a certain uncomfortable time being in that room, or people looking at you, because they're kind of they get a bit disengaged because they think he doesn't know what we should do. And it takes a lot of time and effort to actually get the people to say, yes, he doesn't know exactly where we're going, but he needs us for that. And that's actually a good thing, right? So that's a bit of a uncomfortable situation. So
Yeah.
if you're responsible for change, transformation, whatever, then it's not always comfortable. It's not the easy route, but I think if you strongly believe in what you're doing, I think it's a route worth taking.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even for you in that situation, right? It's in very traditional systems, we're always rewarded for knowing things, for having the right answers, for setting the direction. And when you walk in, it's probably also uncomfortable as for you as a leader, right? To say, nope, we're going to do this together. I don't know, have all the answers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, how did you then, from that initial interaction, right? So you said I don't have the answers. How did you go about engaging everyone in the process, when there was that level of uncertainty and anxiety about, will we have the right answers together or not?
I think after this moment of silence, which is comfortable probably for both sides, but probably, yeah, I think you need to quickly, I mean, perhaps not in seconds, perhaps it takes a couple of days or some weeks or some meetings, you need to get into doing mode together. Right. So I think this co-creation is something that I'm always fascinated about. And the sooner you get into a co-creation mode together, then you find out actually there are similar ideas in the room here. And uh, in order to get that happening, I think it's very important to not start with the biggest problems or the most challenging problems or the most problems where you probably need a lot of, how should I say, approval, alignment with other stakeholders that might not be in the room, right? I think it's very good if you start with these little things that get on your nerves, that everybody doesn't like, right? Is
Yeah.
it getting your vacation approved and how many workflows it needs, or is it like just ordering smaller stuff for your office environment? Yeah, like all these little things that really everybody, or too many meetings or something like that, right? So start with small things that the people have at least to a certain extent power over, and then start with that co-creating on those topics, and then people realize, okay, it's not major steps, but we have done a couple of steps, and that kind of motivates and bonds together the team as well.
Mm. I love that. I love that you're creating that sense of agency, and almost growing the level of the perception of control that a person or a team has by taking those small steps, right? With those small
Mhm.
movements and those small wins, and accumulating them to say, okay, this is what we were able to achieve. Let's dream what more we can do with this now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I'm wondering, in all of this, what has been your experience of the role of the leadership team? How have you what's really important for leaders to get right in a transformation journey?
I think a story that comes to mind when I think about leaders is something from the very beginning of my career, where as I told you, I started in consulting, and freshly from university, you start with all these nice things of traveling and seeing great companies and fantastic offices. And my first project actually was a bit of a firefighter project, basically in the UK, in the middle of nowhere, and my then project leader at that time, he basically, just before we went to meet the client, basically put me by the side and said, you know what, be bold and behave like you have a couple of years experience, because I think that's what the other side thinks you have. And I was kind of shaken up, because I was like, good Lord. But in the end, he didn't do that, because I saw it then in the weeks coming. He didn't do that to really punish me or to put me in an uncomfortable situation. He basically gave me the feeling to say, you know what, it's also only just people. Do what think is right, listen carefully to them, get a personal connection to them. And if something goes wrong, I'm there for you. And he proved that over the couple of months that we worked together. It was actually over a year, where we really realized, okay, it's not rocket science, but you need to listen to people. You need to be really bold and also be independent as much as possible. But if there's something, I'll be there for you. And I think giving me this autonomy to try out things and to be there is a thing that I would expect leaders, now that I'm also being led by people still, right? And give me the freedom, but also stand behind me if something really goes down the drain, which might not have been my total influence as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I love that. So he gave you a bit of a push, right, to make you step out of your comfort zone and challenge yourself in a situation where maybe you did need a few years of experience, but he believed in you, and at the same time gave you that safety net, so you didn't feel like it was all on your shoulders and it's a make or break situation if things go wrong.
Yeah, and I think it's. I mean, in retrospective, it's easy to say, right? I mean, you have in a very black and white worldview, you could say they're the one managers who micromanage you, who tell you everything to do. And then the other world, the other side is like they give you all the freedom, and they're also not there if you need help, right? It's the two very opposite. I mean, very dramatic things. And I think to have enough autonomy, but really feel safe if something happens, I think that's also something that I expect from modern leadership, right? To give you a vision in terms of where we want to go as a team, and I'm leading that team, but then really encourage you to think for yourself, act for yourself, and if something goes down the drain, we are in it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super important, right? That empowerment without boundaries, without that that direction and the boundaries to support, right? It's not really empowerment. It doesn't help.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from you is that from a leadership perspective, right, the role of a leader is really to give that guidance, that direction, that vision for the future, while also providing the safe space for the employees to feel safe, to feel psychologically safe, because it will be an uncomfortable uncomfortable process for them.
Mm-hmm.
I guess when an organization gets this awareness that they must go on this journey and really make a dedicated effort to move in a certain direction, and that initial state of the journey where you have a lot of these, kickoffs, these town halls, this energy, this momentum to make something out of it, versus a more mature stage, right? 2-3 years down the road, now you've done this over time. How have you experienced the transformation journey and the level of energy and the momentum that goes along with it from the beginning to more mature part of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, how should I say it? I think, of course, people cannot be 150% engaged over an extensive period of time, right? It's just like again, humans, if they are excited 24 hours a day, it's not sustainable, right? I mean, you need your sleep, you need your downtime, in your regular day, you also need this change in mood, right? So other way around, if you're 100% totally excited, I think you're exhausted after a couple of days. And transferring that to organizational thinking, I think what helps is trying to ignite always little things again when you think the mood is going. There's no light anymore, there's no energy anymore in the room, but really do that in a sorted way, that you don't over engineer it and that you don't overreact, let the organization overreact. On the other hand side, I think it can also, depending on why you're a bit in a down phase or why it's taking after 2 or 3 years perhaps a different, is also to talk to the people and say, you know what, look back 2 or 3 years ago where we started. I think this many people, once you're in the tunnel in your everyday life, in operational responsibilities and getting your business forward, sometimes it's just good to say, let's pause for a second and look backwards what we have done. Like, what is the journey we have taken, and are we kind of proud of it? Are we happy where we are? I think then a lot of people say, well, I'm really happy of what kind of effort we put in and where we are today. And that actually also motivates people to say, it helped then to change certain things. Perhaps I need to think about the new things that I want to change. So I think these are the two, immediate answers I would try to formulate.
Yeah. And I also, I like this thing you said about pausing, right? I feel like that even a pause in our life is really important, to take a moment to take stock. I think personally, I do it every year at New Year's, before I set my resolutions up to fail. I take a moment to really reflect on the year that's gone by and what did I learn from it, and what do I want to do differently, right? So even for organizations, it's good to take stock of that and take note of all that has been achieved to get that energy back. But I also asked this question specifically because, I work with a few companies right now for the transformation, and I have noticed this, right? That the energy that is there in the beginning, it will dissipate. It will go down if we don't build in moments of plateau, moments of assimilation in the process. And I think that's one of the traps that I feel like organizations should be aware of, that at the end of the day, it will burn people out if you do too much too fast in the beginning and not space it out. And I think that's a really important thing to take stock of, because even as human beings, right, if we are constantly in a learning zone, or if we're always learning something and not taking the time to assimilate and have those moments of plateau in our lives where we can take that downtime to really rest and learn and help our brain make those connections, it doesn't help us in the end. It doesn't get transferred to our long-term memory, doesn't become part of who we are. And that was just something that I wanted to see if that was also your experience with Bosch. I know it's been it's your 5th year, right? You started the journey in 2016. How did you build any moments of rest and plateau in the journey, and what was your experience of it?
I think it's going a little bit in the same direction as you just started, basically answering it a little bit, is the following, that if you do transformation, it doesn't really mean if it's an agile transformation or a technical implementation or whatever cultural transformation you want to start. I think it always has very different facets, right? It's not this one leadership training that everybody should do and then we are all happy. Especially when you look in cultural transformations, it's probably how we are being led. It's how we collaborate with each other. It's how we respect each other, how we give feedback with each other. So it's like, it's a full flower basket of things that you can do to shift or change or co-create a new culture, right? And I think what you need to identify probably are big sections which you want to address, and not try to do all sections the same time with the same amount of effort, because it will speak to different people. If you think about changing leadership style, then you of course speak first to the current leaders or potential new leaders in the organization. And you might get a plateau or this reaping these benefits of your investment if you don't foster that on a, push it attitude, but also reap the benefits on this plateau. I really like that phrase that you used there, this plateau thinking. But in the meantime, you might find other areas which you kind of neglected because you put so much effort in this section, that other parts of the organization are actually hungry for some change. So I think you need to think in different baskets that you can nurture this seed that you want to grow. And then the good or the sad part for the transformation people is there's never something where you cannot do anything. But I think it's not over engineering or over entertaining the whole organization at the same time, but rather finding solutions for specific people, roles, or groups.
Yeah. And I love that basket analogy. I think that's something that I found helpful, right? Like in designing an organizational transformation journey is almost like, creating a play or a musical performance of some kind, right? You need to take into account the experience map of how are people what are the moods that they're going to feel at what parts of the journey. And you're absolutely right. Like thinking in terms of the baskets and the audiences, who are you working with at what intensity at what point, and then maybe have a different focus to give them the time to rest and assimilate. I really really like the basket analogy. That's very helpful. Thank you. I know we talked about the good parts, right? The motivation, the hope, all that we need to change, the people involved. I am wondering, just like in any process, right? Even in transformations, disagreements are inevitable. They are likely to come up. And from your experience, what have been the necessary conditions to bring up those disagreements in a constructive dialogue and actually resolve them? And if you could share any examples or stories from your experience, that would be great.
I think the first thing is that we need to take into consideration that the disagreements are not bad itself, right? Because disagreements, if I would disagree with what you just said and I would raise it, then I think that would be a fruitful discussion between the two of us, right? And if we would not need to decide something together, that's also totally fine. Because then I could say, okay, it was nice talking to you, but I actually look for other people that I want to talk with, right? But if you want to achieve something together, then of course, sooner or later, you need to come to the conclusion to say, okay, you have a different opinion than I have, but how do we move forward, right? So the point of making a decision will not go away simply because we have a disagreement. So we need to find ways on really also making sure how decisions are being made in organizations. And while moving away from one person decides for everybody to everybody decides for everybody is also this black and white thing, I think there's a lot of gray in between that is worth taking, right? Yeah. And what I see sometimes is this interpretation of whatever you want to call it, modern, progressive, agile, or whatever, is we listen to everybody, but we are not making a decision at the end, which is then totally new, right? But yes. I think that's hard because if you don't make a decision, it's a decision by itself. And I'm not sure if it gets too philosophical, right? But if we need to decide, the two of us, on some certain topics. We have different opinions. The simple fact that we don't make a decision doesn't resolve the issue, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's also about getting clarity on how decisions are being made, then make the decisions and respect that we have different opinions on it. But then this famous quote on disagree and commit is very crucial in organizations, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it comes from the tech world, but it basically says we can have different opinions, but once we decide as a leadership team, as an organization, that we move that direction, then please don't talk bad about it in the back. Just go and commit to it, because that's the journey we decided on. And I think that's also crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see your point over there. Have there been any rituals or practices that have actually helped you stick to that? Because I know that it is philosophical and it's somewhat of a mindset shift, right? That we as people we commit to that. To that, the fact that we might have disagreements, but when we decide, we're all backing it up. But along the way, were there any moments where, okay, that didn't happen? And then how did you actually, what were some of the practices that may have helped you get there?
I think to have perhaps a more practical example to showcase what I mean is, and it's coming from not an ideal situation to a better situation, is the following. Let's imagine a group of people gets the task from a leader to look into a certain topic, if we should go do A or B, right? But the group has the feeling that the leader already knows what he wants, right? So it's kind of a bit of a fake exercise. But moving away from that is actually you give a task to a group of people to say, should we go A or B? And then we meet together. And the biggest change for many leaders should be not to start the conversation in a room, to listen to the experts, to the teams. I mean, this is empowering the people, because if you're entering a room and 10 people enter and the leader's entering and he starts first, then he kind of sets the agenda on where it's going, because then you need very brave people to say, actually, I totally disagree with you. But if you have a different, it's a very small change, but it's a very practical one. If you just coach the leader to just be quiet at the beginning of the meeting and listen carefully, then he really hears the different opinions. But at the end of the day, if there's no full alignment or full agreement, then of course the leader still makes the decision in that case, perhaps, right? And that's also okay. But listen first and then make the decision is probably one of the small advice that has a big impact.
Yep.
And that I have seen in multiple occasions where that actually helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I've also experienced that, right? Just that act of listening, just making that decision. We're just going to listen empathetically. Maybe we'll ask open questions, but that's really it. That's all we're going to do.
And I think that the leaders have like this real responsibility. I think I heard it from Jürgen Klopp, actually, this football coach, once in an interview, where he basically said, if you enter a room as a leader, you have a very high responsibility for the mood in the room, right? So the team itself that you're approaching actually might not know that you had a very stressful meeting beforehand, or that you just didn't sleep well, or that you have whatever. But I mean, every leader, or I would even phrase it, every person who enters a room has a certain responsibility to have a certain impact on the mood in the room. And I think that's something which is, of course, as a leader, everybody looks at you when you enter the room. So I think the responsibility is a bit higher. But I think that's also something which we sometimes forget along our very hectic and stressful days.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also, I think, a lot of the, I noticed the companies have started doing this bottom up strategy process, right? They call it bottom up. But it's exactly to create that platform, right? So instead of going out with, this is what we're going to do you have any ideas? Let's start with where the people are. Let's start with what they see, what's important to them, what are the pain points. From there, derive a vision, and then re-engage the organization on how do we move forward with this, right? But I like what you're saying, that very simple act of reversing the order in which information is shared from the lead, instead of leader to people, it's people to leader, plays a huge difference in what information you actually get from the process.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we talked a lot about, the transformations and some examples from your life about the fears and everything, right? But in terms of also the personal, and I'm bringing this back to the person, because I know how much you see the transformation also as a very human thing. What are some of the changes do you feel like need to happen in each individual to be able to even go on with this transformation journey? What has been your experience, or maybe the inner transformation that you went through to lead this massive transformation in Bosch Power Tools?
I think it really helps to always start also with yourself, right? I think it's very easy it doesn't need to be the organizational setup, but also in private life, to say, oh, I cannot do it because of him, her, whatever. I cannot start because of these circumstances and because of this and that. And I think while it is very important to, how should I say, to dissect what you can influence, what you cannot influence, you need to realize that the things you can influence are actually not that small. And you better start with those ones before trying to change the whole world in a way to where you don't have the influence, because you might hit a rock bottom very soon, right? But I think if everybody in society, in teams, in whatever you want to frame it, starts with trying to make a little step what he can control, I think we already moving into in a better future for all of us, right? So I think that's the one thing. Start with yourself. Don't wait for somebody to tell you what to do, but start with yourself, what you can change. And I think that's, people don't realize that those small changes have a huge impact, either for your personal, if you do it consistently, or for people around you as well, because they might look, oh, there's something that I can change as well.
So you can really have that ripple effect on people, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, I mean, personally for you, Jochen, what is the ripple effect that you hope to create? And what is your next move on your inner personal or professional transformation journey?
Yeah, personal. I think I stated, I don't know, at the beginning of our conversation a bit, I was never the guy who knew exactly what to do in 5 or 10 years. In some areas, that's a disadvantage, because you might think you don't have that one clear plan that you can follow. On the other hand, you're very open for new challenges, for continuous challenges, and you're just there when things are happening. And I think, therefore, I don't have this big plan. I think I really want to work in the transformation area. There are a lot of things in my private life that I want to go forward, a lot of things in business life at Power Tools that I want to go forward. There's a lot to do. And I'm trying to use a picture more, trying to ride the wave and not trying to find only the perfect wave, right? So I think that's something which usually helped me to get to very nice places so far in my life, and I hope that journey continues in different waves and different stages then.
Beautiful. I hope so too. And so maybe just to wrap up, could you complete the sentence for me? When I drop my armor,
I want to feel safe and then be very transparent.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jochen. It was really lovely speaking to you. And I hope we can talk more at a future point about transformations and other things. Tennis, maybe.
Or astronauts. Thanks a lot so much for having me.
Thanks.